We are very happy to host Miss Spannring, which Branka will introduce in more detail. And today we will speak about animals. We are subjectivity. Very happy to host. So yeah, I will let Branka introduce our guest this month, and hope you enjoy. I'm sure you will the lecture and the discussion afterwards.
Yes, so yes, we're all very happy. Rana is with us today. It's really lovely to see you, Rana. It's really lovely to see Tomasz, because Tomasz introduced us, and I'm really grateful, Tomasz, for that. So let me briefly introduce Rana. Rana is a sociologist and works at the Institute for Educational Science at the University of Innsbruck. Her research focus lies on critical animal pedagogy, environmental education, and philosophy of education. She is a member of the European Educational Research Association and a member of the interdisciplinary research Human Animal Studies at the University of Innsbruck, which has not only published a range of books in German, but also organizes conferences, workshops, and lectures. Her recent work has revolved around questions about critical pedagogy, of learning for a just transspecies society, and the possibilities for learning with and from non-human others. In today's lecture, that is entitled Education and the Consumption of Animal Subjectivity, Rana will focus on the issue of subjectivity in a consumerist society and patterns of interpersonal and interspecies relationships. So, Rana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Branislava, for this. I will just share my PowerPoint.
I think there is a problem with the sound. Marco? Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's better now.
Okay, I'm closer to the microphone. Yes. Maybe that was the problem. Okay, well, thanks again, Branislava, for the introduction. I will start right away with my presentation. As you can see, and as Branislava has already said, it's on education and the consumption of subjectivity. Okay, I will start with a quote from Adorno and Horkheimer, the two, I would say, most prominent representatives of critical theory. They say, the domination of non-human animals and nature includes the domination of humans, because in order to subject external nature, the human must subject his or her own internal animality and nature. In my own conceptual language, I would say our loss of subjective experience is closely linked to the denial and destruction of animal subjectivity. And my aim in this presentation is to consider the question how and why we lose or destruct subjectivity. And I will be talking about a little bit about the human subject in humanism, the human subject in consumer society, and the animal subject in consumer society. And in order to clarify this a little bit more, I will also talk about training and the effects of training on the subject. Right, let's plunge right away into the question about the subject in humanism. Humanism, the great achievement of the West, has become questionable insofar as Homo sapiens is seen as the measure of all things, constructed through anthropina and a hierarchized juxtaposition of man and animal, culture and nature, and mind and body. These pairs of opposites created an unbridgeable gap between the real human being on the one hand and the only partially human, the subhuman, and the non-human. And this, to this day, makes possible the denial of the subjectivity of these living beings, and thus their marginalization, exploitation, and annihilation. Sociopolitical progress has led to the fact that some of these people who were previously excluded from the category of human beings have been recognized as subjects and citizens, such as women and people of color. Nevertheless, humanism remains ultimately limited by its definition of the human. Non-human others are still largely excluded from subject status and, of course, from the status of fellow citizens. Humanism and its inherent anthropocentrism have also led to an obscuring of the real relations. These are, on the one hand, the material commonalities and mutual dependencies between humans and animals. And on the other hand, the power and violence that permeate animal-human relations. Altogether, they deny alternative ways of being in this more than human world. However, the human being is not only a human being as a member of the species Homo sapiens, but the human being is also the product of education. The anthropological machine tames the subjectivity of students by suppressing what they have in common with other animals, and thus dissolves any meaningful interspecies connection. Instead, since Plato, students have been trained in formal, abstract, and rational thinking to produce the modern citizen. The Enlightenment expanded this abstract reason to include the empirical method of the natural sciences in the service of the exploitation of humans, animals, and nature. Under late modern conditions, the end product of humanization is the flexible worker, the informed consumer, the adapted citizen, and the self-organized lifelong learner. So there is always a prefabricated image of what constitutes the human being, and this is to be achieved through education. Dehumanization, the treatment of people as if they were animals or small cogs in the wheel of bureaucracy or capitalism, is structurally homologous to humanization, in that both depend on the possibility and necessity of determining who and what the proper subject is. Humans and animals who are beyond the line of definition lose their subjectivity and their voice in the process of objectification and commodification. At the same time, the educational institution dehumanizes those who are passed through a humanizing education. And thus, Ivan Illich can say, school is the advertising agency, which makes you believe that you need the society as it is. Education is responsible to integrate us into society and to make society seem normal and necessary to us. Now let us turn to consumer society. In consumer society, citizens are first and foremost consumers. Under the regime of consumerism, human wants and desires become the primary driving force of society. This force coordinates systemic reproduction, that is the perpetuation of economic and social conditions, social integration, that is we secure our social belonging through consumption, and social structuring. Depending on what and how we consume, we belong to different social classes. Consumerism is a feature of society. It decouples needs and desires from the individual and reifies them into an external force that drives individual behavior and strategies. Happiness and contentment are not associated with the fulfillment of needs, but with the rapid consumption and replacement of the objects that should fulfill our needs. Consumption has become the human way of being in the world, at least in the Western world. It determines the style and taste of social life, as well as the pattern of interpersonal and interspecies relationships. Consumerism does not establish a political community, but a community comparable to a swarm, as Zygmunt Bauman explains. A swarm is not a group with a structure and leadership, but a swarm comes together, dissolves, and finds itself again from one occasion to another, with changing meanings and roles. In a swarm, there is no need for loyalties, obedience, or renunciation of freedom. Disagreement, confrontation, and discussion, the hallmarks of a public space, dissolve as tensions and contradictions are absorbed and utilized. Rebels and critics simply leave the swarm. Under these conditions, responsibility for the consequences of actions and decisions shifts to the individual. But responsibility is the opposite of the freedom that is celebrated in consumer society and boils down to responsibility for oneself. This responsibility loses sight of the other as an object of moral action. Interpersonal relationships often resemble the relationships between consumers and their consumer goods. Objects of love that do not meet our expectations are not bought in the first place, or are replaced by others if they prove to be defective after we bought them. The search for a partner becomes an emotionally distanced activity. As you can see on this picture, this is a picture of a dating app where you can search for people with a beard. So this is a very distant activity. And Zygmunt Bauman says, as if people were cutlets in the butcher's shop window. Of course, for us, this has a far-reaching meaning when Zygmunt Bauman uses this comparison. In such a consumerist relationship, the need to care for the other becomes an unbearable burden that limits our flexibility and freedom. Conversely, a relationship that is lasting and caring requires love, activity, and a behavior that is not based on routine, but on the attention to the intrinsic nature of the partner, on the effort to understand his or her individuality, and on respect. But it is not only the other who is treated like a commodity. Consumer society leads us to design ourselves as commodities, that is, as products that attract attention and buyers on the market. For example, the labor market or the relational market. Consumer performance is the overriding criterion for inclusion and social recognition. And just as consumption does not aim to achieve final fulfillment or satisfaction, it is not about satisfaction with oneself, but about permanent self-commodification and self-dramatization. The goods we buy and the way we do things and take responsibility are chosen to have the greatest effect on us as saleable commodities. Subjectivity itself becomes a commodity. That is, the process of commodification engulfs our subjective experience in the ceaseless attempt to make itself felt and be recognized in the sea of mass consumption. Karl Marx used the term commodity fetishism to draw attention to the hidden human labor and suffering behind the products. In a similar way, Zygmunt Bauman uses the term subjectivity fetishism to highlight the commodified reality in consumer society. That which we assume to be the materialization of the inner truth of the subject is in fact the idealization of the material, the commodified. By confusing our acting with real life, consumerism makes it more and more difficult for us to experience real life with an openness to the unknown. We will come back to that, and I hope it becomes clearer when we move to the animals. So let us now apply Zygmunt Bauman's concepts to the animals and human-animal relations. I'll first turn to commodification and commodity fetishism. The violent and exploitative relations of humans to animals are well hidden by commodity fetishism. The capitalist processes of production and trade separate the value and meaning of objects from their social and material origins. The economic and cultural value of objects appears as their essential essence. The social structures and processes that lie behind them appear to be natural and therefore unquestionable. Commodity fetishism has great influence on our relations with animals because it separates us from the living, feeling bodies of animals and their subjective experiences. Beef burgers, pork chops, and chicken nuggets allow for the intensified production and marketing of animal products without a major moral outcry from the public. How can citizens develop empathy and care when they are socialized to be consumers and when the dominant form of relationship to animals is a consumptive one that deprives animals of their subject status? More difficult to grasp than the bodily consumption of animals, however, is the commodification of so-called pets and companion animals who we love and care for. The commodification of the other in love, partnership, and friendship relationships that Bauman criticizes can be applied literally to our close animals. Many of us choose and buy them according to our preferences and expectations. We express our love for them by buying them consumer goods like toys, special collars and halters, coats, Christmas and birthday presents, as evidenced by the exorbitant profits in the pet market. Love and affection often have very little to do with the animals themselves, their intrinsic value, socio-cognitive needs, and subjective experiences. Instead, they are related to our own needs and projections. That is, they should be cuddly, loyal, loving, well-behaved, and undemanding, that they convey social status, and that they should generally fit into our lifestyle and daily routines. This kind of love has anthropoformative and homologizing consequences and destroys the authority of the other. Even while they are caressed, cuddled, and petted, they cannot become life partners because they are stigmatized as pets. The dominance of this consumerist approach becomes particularly obvious and dramatic when the pet turns out to be a defective commodity that must be disposed of. Every year, millions of pets are euthanized or redeemed, as people like to say. 2 examples. A man brings a cat to the shelter. She has lived with him for 8 years. She's a beautiful specimen of an unusual breed and has flattered his ego with her exotic personality. But now he has decorated his home and she is losing hair that does not match the new colors. He can't bring himself to brush the cat and has instead found a short-haired specimen of an even rarer cat breed. He hopes that his old cat will find a good new home and leaves. Then a dog comes to the shelter, a 1-year-old bundle of energy who has fun by chewing shoes and digging holes. His owners have tried to keep him indoors and outdoors, but have been unable to change his behavior. Husband and wife, his supposed friends, work long hours, lead busy lives, and don't have much energy left for the dog. They had hoped to find in him a release from their stressful lives, but instead he has demands and needs. They leave him behind with relief. Maybe a cat will do. It is easy to accuse these people of moral failure, but it's at least as important to understand how our consumer culture colors our relationship with animals. The commodity animal allows us to treat them as commodities, and it allows us to use them for our self-commodification. One example of how we use animals in our struggle for social recognition are animal products. Meat consumption, especially red meat consumption, is a symbol of patriarchy associated with masculinity and power. Men generally eat more meat than women and integrate their pro-meat attitudes into normative patterns that value strength, toughness, athleticism, dominance, emotional restraint, and denial of animal suffering. At the other end of the spectrum is veganism, a lifestyle characterized by the abstention from the consumption of animals and animal products. Some vegan celebrities choose to market their vegan consumption choices. Self-marketing strategies differ to the extent in which veganism is foregrounded and the radicalism with which the ethics and politics of meat consumption is publicly criticized. If nothing else, this strategy influences their success as celebrity commodities, especially because the media and the public would prefer to see veganism as a diet and lifestyle rather than a moral and political statement. This is also a good example of how consumer society manages to integrate and exploit dissent and criticism by destroying the moral and political dimension. There is also a strong, if mostly unconscious, dimension of self-commodification in pet ownership. In the past, pet ownership has always been associated with the upper social classes because the ownership of non-functional, expensive animals expressed power and economic resources. In comparison, pet ownership in the lower class has been seen as wasteful and inappropriate and was often criticized and disciplined by the middle classes. Today, it is mainly pedigree animals who are expensive to buy and or to keep that still convey social status. However, domestic and companion animals also convey, and still do so, gender identity and norms, as well as desirable personality traits and temperament of the owner. They also expand the possibilities of social encounters in dog parks and shows, trainings and competitions, which give the owners information about their identity and social recognition. Even if the animals, in most cases, have the status of a person and family member, their part in the self-commodification of their owners makes them vulnerable and susceptible to discipline, violence, or elimination if they do not meet the owner's expectations. This can be the horse who does not perform well enough, the dog who has developed a problematic behavior, or the cat who no longer fits into his owner's lifestyle. Baumann's subject fetishism can also be applied to animal-human relationships and exposes the superficiality of our love and care for animals. The confusion of the material, the objectified, the performance with subjective experience is evident in relationships and encounters between humans and animals. Tracy Warkentin, a colleague in the United States, talks about her experiences with captive animals based on her study in swim with dolphin programs. She calls it captive consumption. And she writes, "Most of the time, I spent waiting for my turn. When I was called, I stepped forward, did what I was told, such as kiss the dolphin, waited for the photo to be taken, and then stepped back to let the next person go forward. It felt like being on a conveyor belt or in a play where you have to stick to the script. I was told exactly where to stand and what to do. The precision of our swimming interaction was first and foremost for the perfect photo taken in each pose and by the professional photographers. The encounter with the dolphin felt like a staging. These stagings produce constructed, idealized tourist experiences. They are based on the commodification of animal and human bodies. Contrary to our expectations, however, these productions seem to reinforce the visitor's impression that they actually had the mind-blowing experience they had hoped and paid for. They do not seem to be bothered by the fact that there is no opportunity for a spontaneous, mutually interesting contact with the dolphin. Similarly, Teresa Loro describes how interactions between visitors and lorikeets are little parrots, are closely monitored and sanitized at the aquarium of the Pacific in California. One aspect of this biological and spatial management of bodies is the sale of special nectar to motivate the birds to land on the visitors. The dependence on the visitors' feedings produces a brief physical contact with the humans and thus fulfills the visitor's desire for entertainment and contact with nature. As with the dolphins, however, the setting does not allow for any subjective experiences, neither for the animals nor for the visitors. In both cases, the animals are held captive and forced into interaction with humans, either through food dependency or through training. While they can be seen as actors when they approach, allow themselves to be touched, or sometimes even bite visitors, there is no subjective experience. A subjective experience depends on there being choice, intrinsic motivation, and the preservation and expression of socio-cognitive competences. These criteria are clearly not met in these two settings. Instead, reactive behavior is produced in the animals so that the expectations of the visitors are fulfilled. But it is not only the animals who cannot have subjective experiences here, but also the humans who only react to their own projections and the management strategies of the zoo. The formal performances of the visitors hide the commodified reality of consumer society. They do not allow curiosity to arise, either in general or for the animal other as a subject, for mutually interesting encounters and shared experiences. Such curiosity always means opening up to the unknown, to oneself and to the subjective experience of the other. The unknown also includes responsibility for the other, which is the basis for a more than human community. Unfortunately, this openness endangers our self-commodification and is therefore readily and well avoided. Let us move on to the issue of training and the role of training. We may think that giving up subjective experience in human-animal relationships is a phenomenon of commercial institutions like zoos. Animal-based entertainment in a capitalist framework has to ensure consumer satisfaction by excluding unpleasant experiences and unpredictable events. But even in our relationships with pets and companion animals, performance usually dominates over subjective experience. Animals are severely limited in their ability to meet their social cognitive needs by being trained to fulfill human projections and cravings and to fit neatly into our daily routines and societal demands. Although overt violence is no longer justifiable, at least in theory, and the discourse predominantly emphasizes love and care, we are not ready to give up control of our animals and relinquish manipulation. Modern behaviorist training methods appear humane, humanized, but their impact on the animal's ability to fulfill their social cognitive needs and to have subjective experiences is not harmless. The linear and mechanical method of eliciting or eliminating behavior impairs and damages the animal's ability to express himself, to understand and respond appropriately to a situation in his own way. Training and conditioning are not designed to give an individual self-determination and power over his or her life, but to make the individual a servant of the trainer or the system. This applies not only to animals, but also to humans, as we have seen in the critique of the education system. Our society seems to be obsessed with behaviorism. Many of us are convinced that the best strategy for getting something from others is to promise them a reward or to threaten to take it away. We assume that this is the most logical way to raise children, teach students, and deal with employees. The rewards and punishments associated with consumerist performance are also excellent reinforcers that produce a certain behavior. So here is the connection with consumer society, all those little things that trigger us to do certain things. Behavior is then no longer an expression of our subjective experience, but the result of self-commodification. The negative effects of A's, scout points, praise, money, and other incentives and bribes are quite well researched. They reduce intrinsic motivation, the feeling of self-determination, curiosity, creativity, risk-taking, cooperation, responsibility. If control by others has already been internalized, that is, one unconsciously controls oneself, this can lead to inner conflict, anxiety, and compulsiveness. Too much self-control means that we are trapped in our behavioral protocol and cannot have subjective experiences. So this is where I would like to show you a little video clip, give you a short break, and maybe reason to laugh. I'll just switch over. While you're watching this, maybe you ask yourself the question, who in this clip is having a subjective experience? So who do you think had a subjective experience in this clip?
So definitely the girl who was dancing freely and listening to the words of the music and reacting accordingly.
Yeah. Why do you think so? You already gave some hints.
Yeah, so she was like totally into it, while other girls were just imitating or probably watching someone who showed them how to dance and they were imitating, but she was like experiencing this, like the joy, and she was listening to the words, and probably because I didn't understand everything, the lyrics completely, but she was reacting directly to the lyrics. It seemed very joyful.
Yeah, thank you. Does anybody else have other observations? So the other girls were very busy remembering and fulfilling the protocol that they had learned. Now they were really stuck in this mind, what do I have to do? And this one openly dancing girl had the liberty and the creativity to be in touch with the music, her own body. She was in touch with the other girl. Yes, she addressed the girl and she addressed the audience. So she was free to do whatever came up for her in that moment. Yeah, thank you, Urška. So yeah, to go back to this to this picture, in relation to animals, we are particularly driven by the need to produce a certain behavior in them, rather than being curious in what they themselves are interested in and how we can have an exciting experience together. The reciprocal relationship with animals allows animals to be what my friends call protagonists of their own life. However, that challenges humans to let go of their expectations and their need for control and need to produce a behavioral result in the animal. And it challenges us to develop a deeper understanding of dialogue. Let me just check with you how you're feeling. I have a conclusion written down, but maybe you feel more like talking and sharing experiences.
I'm either, but I find your lecture extremely interesting, so I would like to continue to listen to it if you have anything additional, and then discuss, because I find it really, really interesting.
Okay. If I get no opposition to this, I will continue. Okay, thanks. Thanks for the feedback. So I will turn to the question of pedagogy now. Critical pedagogy and post-humanist education both criticize the dominance of the discourse of efficiency, effectiveness, and measurability in educational policy and practice. Education policy and practice tends to silence the discussion about the goals and values of education, and it secretly predefines identities and subjectivities in learners, such as the good worker, the consumer, the well-adjusted citizen, and the lifelong learner. Parts of critical pedagogy and post-humanist pedagogy explicitly link the oppression of humans in the education system and in capitalist mass culture to the exploitation of nature and non-human animals. An education that alienates us from life in the name of human dominance, success, and constant growth supports a postmodern culture that pre-programs ecological and animal ethical disaster. It damages our sense of wonder, belonging, relationship, and caring by reducing learning to routine, memorization, abstractions, boring curricula, achievement and grades, and to exclusively human issues and perspectives. At the heart of this is a humanistic self-enclosure, which does not allow the other to be experienced as an equal partner on a journey together. Whether that other is a difficult child, a student of a different ethnicity or religion, the animal in themselves, or the animal other. Animal sensitive education research has developed a wealth of knowledge about how socialization and educational processes undermine the possibilities for equitable, I use Tomáš's word, trans-species communities. Although children usually have a special affinity for animals and can also make independent moral decisions, for example, about eating meat, they learn very quickly to distance themselves from animals and to place themselves in a hierarchy of values. Toys and media of young children contain specific messages that animals in the world are in the world for the benefit and pleasure of us humans. The voices of animals are silenced, and the living conditions and circumstances of death are obscure. Childcare institutions and schools, while recognizing the potential of animals to enhance children's development, are very strict about maintaining the animal-human dualism. Thus, it is not surprising that kindergarten children often speak of animals as their friends, while 10-year-olds are more likely to express fear and aggression towards animals. The education system, with its disciplinary divisions, classrooms, and teaching methods, continues to marginalize non-human animals. The almost exclusive interest in facts and abstract knowledge, the obsession with all things human, the reduction of learning to measurable output, and the devaluing of nature experience crowd out the possibilities of the participation in a more than human world. The cultivation of sensitivity, the ability to hear and see, and compassion for all living beings. Instead, practices such as dissecting animals in schools or even animal-assisted therapy and education teach children that animals may be used for our curiosity, career, comfort, and well-being. The interests of the animal industrial complex are protected by school canteens that do not offer healthy alternatives to meat consumption, and the school's normalization of the exploitation and killing of animals. In times of deep ecological crisis, species extinction, and the mass killing of so-called farm animals, we need an education that takes on a form of ecological or multi-species healing. This would mean looking at students and teachers holistically, also in their relationships with non-human animals and the earth, understanding that we live in a biotic community. The path to this healing cannot be imagined, but must be experienced. What others have problematized as the nature deficit syndrome points at the need for more direct experience of nature and animals. Such an experience enables the rediscovery of our senses that connect us with the trans-species community, the rediscovery of our roots in the non-human, and an immersion in the unimaginable wild possibilities of other animals and places in nature. Animal-sensitive education already offers us a whole list of ideas on how to allow free experiential spaces outside of structured settings and time. For example, Gavin Watson describes how children at a nature camp meet a frog and explore how and where he lives, what he is interested in, and where he's going. Tracy Varkentin implements a slow pedagogy in Central Park in Manhattan, New York, where students spend a semester regularly visiting a specific spot in the park, observing animals. Kate Rosmanit describes a body and space-based learning that helps students safely share an area with saltwater crocodiles in Queensland, Australia. Experiences of animal subjectivity are possible not only in the wild, but also in our cities, neighborhoods, and even in the classroom, for example, with a spider. Spending quiet time with an animal can help us rediscover our own capacity for subjective experience and how to share subjective experience with others. This can lead us to question how we live with other animals, how other animals would want to live with us, how we can redesign our cities, transport routes, consumption habits, holiday demands in the interests of the animals. A learning space characterized by attentiveness and responsiveness to the animal other brings the whole body into relationship and presupposes a way of knowing based on ethics. Tracy Warkentin calls it an interspecies etiquette. However, for me, it does not only imply the will and ability to listen, but also an awareness how contexts and dynamics can make subjectivity possible or prevented. An experience as consumption, as I described earlier with the dolphins and parrots in the zoo, does not represent a setting that allows for an interspecies etiquette. Subjective experience, as I mean it, requires that I understand the socio-cognitive abilities and needs of the animal other and my own. A subjective experience precludes us from reacting to our own identity or our projections onto the other, or trying to create a result in the other. If, for example, as an ecotourist, I construct a baby orangutan in a reintroduction camp as a cuddly fur to be mothered, I cannot experience the orangutan as a subject, nor can I share an experience with that baby. If I rustle a plastic bag full of dog treats to get my dog come over, I produce the behavior of a good dog. But neither I nor he can have a subjective experience, since we are both only reacting to a strong stimulus, dog treats. Both of us follow a script and no longer have the possibility to perceive the other as a subject or to have a shared experience. In consumer society, the experience as consumption, the subjectivity of the consumer, is deeply internalized and feels completely right. It masks processes of commodification and self-commodification. Stepping out of these processes is very difficult and requires an ongoing commitment, an ongoing deconstruction, not just of anthropocentrism, but also of our logic, rationality, order, functions, structures, and purposes. We must engage in a decommodification of ourselves, challenge our projections, expectations, and behavior protocols to rediscover our own and the other's subjectivity. Here we go with my final two pictures. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Rana, for a really inspiring and very interesting lecture. So I would like to invite all of you to ask questions or give comments.
Or share experiences.
Or share experiences, yes. Vesna?
Oh, yes, thank you for your lecture. It was really nice. I have to turn off video because simultaneously, otherwise the internet connection goes down if I do both voice and image. So one term or one word caught my attention. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I'm currently working on my master thesis on anthropomorphism or anthropomorphization. And it was one interesting thing you said, anthropoformating. This is what I really, it caught my attention also in this context of the things that I'm currently working with, and also as sort of an upgrade of anthropomorphism, more on like this whole society level, as you were discussing all the time. And I really like this neologism, or maybe you can explain something more about it. Is it like your term or?
No, I will put the name in the chat.
Okay.
This is an Italian philosopher, Marquesini. That's his term. And I think what he means is that we integrate the animals into our daily structures, and we try to make them as similar to us as possible so that they can fit into our life, rather than making the life conditions in a way that they can be themselves.
Okay, really nice. I'll check on it. Thank you.
Yeah, I find this also extremely interesting, this concept. And this is Marchesini. Can you recommend like an article or a book?
Yes.
Because I think this is like usually in this anti-speciesist movement, we are very aware of anthropomorphism and also aware of the autonomies that the animals should have. But I think this is so animal formatting, I think, is a step further. And it would also be really nice to, be able to have like not really concrete directions,
but
or how to create such an environment also for our animals. I mean, I think about this a lot, because I think that we are, with our companion animals such as dogs and so on, we really enforce our lifestyle on them. And I'm thinking about this a lot, how to create a space for my dog, for example, to feel more like an autonomous person.
Yes, that's a big question. I was just trying to find the reference. I can't find it at the very moment, but I'll send it to Branka and she can distribute it. Yes, this is quite a long journey. It was a long journey for me. I found this approach when I was looking for a method to do an ethnography in human-animal studies. And I wanted it to be about horses and humans. And reading all the papers that I could find on human-horse relationships, it struck me that they have no theoretical frame to interpret the horses. They are always interpreted from a very anthropocentric position. So riding is normal, training horses is normal. They must fit into how we have created our landscape. They should not be, for example, they should not run away from tractors and cars, because this is how our society works. So I started to look for an approach, and I found Francesco Di Giorgio. I'll just put this down. He is a biologist, and he developed what he calls the socio-cognitive model. And that gave me the background for seeing horses in a very different light. And to start, it was a long journey for me. To deconstruct oneself is not so easy. But I started to see how we constantly impinge on the animals. For example, it's our urge to give them a treat, but the stimulus of giving them a treat even if we love them and we do it because we love them, just giving them the stimulus detracts them from their own interests. So the dog will be interested in something on the floor or in the garden, and I call out to my dog and say, come on, I've got something for you. And he will have to react to this stimulus because the stimulus is so strong, or because he has learned that it means something for him. So that is just one aspect of this, how we constantly interrupt the animals' questions. They have their own questions, and I think it's just such a big relief when you start recognizing them and giving space and time to the animals so that they are able to do this more and more. I can't hear you, Katja.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, so this is because you mentioned this quite a lot, socio-cognitive needs of animals. And can we ever truly know? I mean, because we always probably will always project to a certain degree. I mean, how do we know what their real needs are? Because I'm asking myself all the time. And can you help us here a little bit? You know, practically or philosophically, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. From this socio-cognitive model, my answer would be follow the animal's attention. Where does the attention go? For example, when you allow me to stick to the example with the horses and the riders, they will take your horse back to the yard where there are many other horses. And of course, the horse will want to know, what are my mates doing? What's going on here? How can I move without causing conflict? But the rider that is not aware of that, the rider wants to go from point A to point B. And he will drag the horse along that. And because the horse is being dragged or drawn with the treat, the horse cannot pay attention to what is going on. So the horse will not have a clear picture of this social landscape and cannot ask questions. So if you stop and you observe together with the horse what is happening, the horse can take her or his own steps to discover something, or to solve a little conflict, or to be associated with another horse. But we don't give it time. We have our plan in our mind, and we want to realize this plan. So I think attention is a very good, I don't know whether you have cats or dogs or.
I have a dog, yeah. So
Yeah.
I've never, and he's not trained. So I think that maybe this is one thing that, you know, I do follow, you know, his attention all the time. I mean, it makes my life really hard sometimes, but I think that this is one of the good things that I've done, that probably that I haven't trained him. Yeah. So it maybe sometimes it was, you know, also for his own, you know, it wasn't in his own benefit, because he would fight with other dogs, or so. I mean, where is this line? You know, it's always probably, you know, a lot of people would ask that question, right? So
can you give an example why you say it makes your life difficult?
Yeah, of course, when I'm in a hurry and he wouldn't listen, or when he would, you know, when he was a puppy, he would bite a few people. And so, you know, I had to explain myself and apologize for him and for myself. And but probably most, I think that sometimes he suffers because of this as well, because when I take him to the vet, he's very uncooperative. So he, you know, I'm hesitant to take him to the vet sometimes and just wait it out at home, because he would feel such pressure, you know, like such, you know, fear, like deathly fear. And so that's, you know, that's the things that I'm thinking about, you know. He's so he's 15 years old now. So But you know, this is still on my mind, you know, the vet question, for example. Things like that. But this is probably, you know, with companion animals, or, you know, a special problem with companion animals.
These are very important things that you mentioned. These are our personal structures, our personal identity that makes it difficult sometimes. We think we have to go to work now, and it has to happen now, so that creates a difficult situation. Or social expectations, as you say. If the puppy jumps up on somebody, then this is difficult. With the vet, what comes to my mind is the question: is the vet cognitive, or is the vet reactive and wants to create something, a finished product?
That's probably, that's true. Vets can be, I have experienced different kinds of vets, and sometimes it was really a good experience, sometimes it was terrible.
Yes, of course, we encounter all those difficulties, and I think the more we become cognitive, the easier it is to find creative solutions. Like, for example, you don't have to go into the dog park. The dog is happy with you. You are his family. He does not need dogs he does not know. So you don't have to take him to the dog park because we all think this is a wonderful experience for the dog. It might not, because the dynamic can be very difficult in the dog park and will cause your dog to become reactive and maybe bite, or something else happens that you do not want to happen. Very often we have these very fixed ideas of how things should be, and then it's a good idea to step back and think, is this really so important? Do I have to go there and be nice to the other dog owners? I think these are very difficult social dynamics.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Des.
Yes, Rana, what do you think? It's really possible to form equal trans-species community with so-called companion animals? Because I'm thinking always we bring these animals into our home in human community, in human homes. So what do you think? Maybe we can form this kind of community to a certain degree, or what kind of possibilities do you see?
Well, I quite like the utopia of Zoopolis, the book by Donaldson and Pimlichka. The idea that, that we really take seriously the idea that that animals have their own world. And these worlds overlap to some extent. But I think maybe there is not necessarily an external structure that we have to create, but it's within ourselves, the acknowledgement that they have their own world and questions and interests. And we will try to deal with the structures that we have in a creative way to allow as much freedom as is possible. We still have responsibilities, I think. Yeah, you wouldn't let your dog run around in town when you know he will not pay attention to cars. So we still have this responsibility, but we can try to play more with what we perceive as limits, structural constraints, be more imaginative. Maybe this is similar to having little children. We want them to grow up in freedom, to run around and be in touch with all sorts of things. But there are certain dangers and certain social constraints. So how do you deal with them? And still trying to enable the child to grow up and flourish rather than being authoritarian and forbidding and training the child.
Yes, but we impose to the small children a kind of social power, maybe as parents, yes. So maybe with animals is similar. Yeah. Urška?
Yeah, I wanted to touch a little bit on the tools or methods of critical pedagogy that you or others use in this context, because you know, Branka has this critical discourse analysis class, and in the organization that I work at, we have a critical literacy workshop. Workshops usually for either high school students or pedagogical workers. And I find it like extremely useful, and extremely, when I was first got to know this concept of critical literacy, which is also developed from critical pedagogy, I felt really, you know, enlightened not only to what it teaches, but the methods and tools it uses. And we have tried to prepare, or did prepare, like workshops on animal rights using these tools with Branka also. But can you give us, like, I mean, I always want to find out lots more about this, because I find it so important, and you don't find many opportunities to learn more about the different
I think our methods I will now talk about our little team in Innsbruck.
Okay.
I think our methods are not that different from yours. We are also talking about the power of language, how we can deconstruct language, the power of cultural practices like carnism. We will try to deconstruct that together with the students. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the core. So I would confirm what you are saying. That is what we do too. I think we could also introduce other approaches, because my experience is our students are very heterogeneous. Some people are very much along the lines of animal protection, and very few are real vegans and animal rights people. And then we have so-called normal people who are meat eating and are just interested because they love animals. So the audience is very mixed. And I sometimes find it difficult, because it seems that we animal rights people tend to impose something on them, and that causes a backlash. It's too provocative for them. So Tomasz and I have been thinking about this in more depth. And I've just recently come across an article where the authors write about humor and how you can use humor to be subversive. So that might be a way of dealing with things. Or in my other project I had with an Australian colleague, we try to motivate students to go outside and do a little ethnography of human-animal relations, just observing and trying to interpret what is happening there. So to be a little bit more open from where they come from, and then only gradually discuss what this might mean and where the difficulties might be. So yeah, I think we could actually explore more pedagogic methods. Or I know Tomasz does philosophy with children. That might also be an approach, especially for younger students, bachelor students, who are not so used to thinking in high theoretical realms.
If I may just jump in before, but Vesna also raised her hand, but I'll try to be really quick and just to say something about this, that critical pedagogy and critical animal studies. So one of the problems we are interested in right now is the following issue. Basically, critical animal pedagogy comes from critical pedagogy, which is related to Paulo Freire, right? And Freire had this idea that basically school, by dividing the school space onto a teacher who is active and a student who is passive, actually trains people into submission. So what you should do is you should never just come in front of students and tell them what they should learn. You should always, as an educator, as a critical educator, work with them and help them to articulate their own problems, right? So that's the basic idea of critical pedagogy. Go to people, provide them with methods like critical discourse analysis, and just listen to their problems and help articulate problems with them, and then try solving those problems. However, of course, when you apply this to animal ethics and animal rights issues, the problem is that you are not dealing with the oppressed, but with the oppressors, right? So that's a special, for Freire, both have to be liberated, but in literature, there is much more emphasis on how to educate and liberate the oppressed ones, and next to nothing on how to liberate the oppressors. I was just Googling 5 minutes ago, and I found 2 sources. One book came out in 2021, which is just now, Pedagogy of the Oppressor. And one is basically an article on pedagogy of the privileged classes. And this is the real issue, how to actually employ those methods, but not for the oppressed ones, to the oppressors. So, yeah, I don't have an answer. I only have a problem. I'm sorry.
Yes, but this is one of our goals within our project, to find the answer. I hope we will. Yes, Vesna.
Yes, this what also Tomasz was talking about reminded me of something. I'm like a substitute lecturer in a project, LGBT friendly, that is based on a city level for like institutions and companies. A few NGOs have this, so, and we're basically having short lectures on LGBT issues. And it's also like this similar situations, because you're not like, you are teaching or
No, we don't hear you, Vesna.
like normal people, heterosexual people. Is my internet okay?
I don't know. Maybe it was only me that had a poor connection. No,
we didn't hear you, Vesna. We only heard normal people.
Yeah.
Wait, you heard normal people and that's it?
Yes.
Nothing else?
We heard the beginning, that you're a substitute lecturer at the LGBTQ, and then it was silence, and then normal people.
So it's a similar situation, because you're discussing the LGBT topics with not with the oppressed in these issues, of course. Maybe other oppressed groups are among people who listen to the lectures. And I was many times, we were in the group discussing about this and also thinking about this, and it sort of reminded me on the context, because it's also because we sometimes we also have these difficult situations when people feel like you're forcing them with some topics, and then they feel oppressed. And then later, when you discuss discrimination, which is of course one important topic with these issues, and then they sort of start to think and talk about how they are discriminated. And it's really this strange cycle that creates, and we were many times also discussing about it. So this was one thing also what Tomasz was saying reminded me of. And the other was many times I was also, because I'm very much interested in literature, I was thinking what what kind of what literature could do, and what kind of like in the process of educating, what kind of space could it have, and what kind of role in this whole? Because I think that I mean, not this typical approach to literature, but more like this, you know, discussing a text as like a beginning of some discussion. This is what I was also thinking about, because I remember Scottish poet Carol Ann Duffy said in one interview that every lecture, no matter what, like geography, math, physics, whatever, should start with a poem. And it really it sort of stayed in my mind, and I was many times thinking about it. I mean, not only like literature, this is like my favorite mode, but I mean also movies, also art in general. I mean, yeah, this.
Oh, great! Thank you, Vesna, for this. Maybe I'll use it in my lecture from now on. Yes, Urška has a hand up.
Yeah, I was just wanted to evolve on on what Tomáš said, because when we do this critical literacy workshops, for example, we always try, if we have time, but usually we don't, because we only have like a certain amount of hours that we can spend with high school students doing this. We always, I mean, the best is always to at the end. So when we go to critical discourse analysis, when we do like reading of a different texts together, or reverse text, or writing reverse text, or a rebel text, we always try to have at the end like the social action part, where everything they have discussed, being in dialogue, analyzed, that they can use, so that they can then at the end use in real life setting. But yes, it can come to this, as you said, with when you discuss animals, you don't have you have only the oppressors, not the oppressed. But now when Vesna was speaking, I mean, lately, for the past 3 years or so, also other topics, like, for example, if we discuss workers' rights or refugees and so on, a lot of students don't recognize themselves as oppressors, or being a part of the oppressor group, but as the oppressed. So this is like a question that is coming up ever more often. I feel for the past 10 years we are doing these workshops, but it has been more difficult for the past 3 years, I think, discussing things. But what you said about what you're doing in Innsbruck with this ethnography, I think we can use this with Zaživali workshops. Maybe we can, like, when we start a workshop, we can use this. We can start, the first thing could be this ethnography, so that the students or the young people go out and just observe the relationship between animals and humans, and then they come back, and then from this point we can start continue the workshop. I mean,
yeah.
I think this is a good
you could start by giving them a general frame through which they can observe. You always need a perspective, and it will probably be a new perspective for them. But maybe try. We will have an exchange later on. Maybe
that would be really
find
nice.
Some new ideas together.
That would be really nice.
So Tomáš, the book that you found on pedagogy for the oppressors, but that does not involve animals, does it?
No, actually the subtitle is, maybe I can actually even share this with you. Just a second. It's this one. I think it's about the refugees on the US-Mexico border. experiential education on the US-Mexico border. So, but that seems to be a fairly new book.
Looks interesting. Yeah. I also wonder whether we could benefit from post-colonial studies, like how to address colonialism in Europe, where most countries have a colonialist history.
Well, maybe one point where you could enter this dynamic and dialectic is actually going back to Freire, because Freire's point there is that he actually stems from Hegel and Herr und Knecht, master and slave dialectics. And according to Hegel, the problem of this unequal relationship is that both are actually not free. Both are enslaved. So obviously a slave is enslaved because his labor is alienated and taken away from him, and surplus value is taken away by the lord, by the Herr, by the master. However, on the other hand, what is the problem of the master? The problem of the master is that he lacks, or she, or whoever that is, that they lack practice. They don't know how, they don't have know-how, they don't know how to work. They become kind of out of touch with reality. They become alienated from the work, from themselves, and from the world. So maybe making people aware of this alienation, and that this alienation is actually structurally connected with the oppression, is the way where you could penetrate the spot out of which then you could maybe continue with the pedagogy of the oppressor. Because the point there is that all parties lose. And also in Hegel, you are not free as a master, because you don't, in Hegel is actually the following is the problem. You always need a recognition. In order to become a free subject, you need to be recognized by the other consciousness. However, if you are a master, the slave cannot recognize you because you reduce them to a not equal person, to a material. So you are not satisfied by the recognition of the slave. You need to be recognized by your equal. And that's why you can never be, you know, this unequal relationship actually causes problems to you yourself. And it's good for you to be in a society of equals. And it's bad for you to be a master. That's the whole point.
I think that is very interesting, Tomasz, what you say. It conjures up a picture in my mind of the horse owners in the stable where my horse is. They come with a treat and they lure their horse to come to them. And for the horse owners, this is an act of love on the part of the horse. They interpret it as love. But as soon as the horse approaches, they will say to the horse, "Ah, well, but you only come because of the treat." So they realize this ambivalence, but they cannot get out of it because they don't know how else they can relate to the horse.
Yes, I think that's that's a structure. I was always, before I knew Hegel, I was playing with this paradox. So imagine imagine that you want other to recognize you as being smart or superior or better than them or whatever. In the moment that they do that, they, by that very act, become disqualified to do that because you are so superior. So who are they to recognize you as superior if you are the one who actually has the knowledge? So you would have to recognize yourself, but that obviously does not work. So the very structure is impossible. It's paradoxical. Of course, if you train an animal, so sit, and if animal obeys you, then of course you can always say, well, but this is not your true volition. You are only doing this because you are afraid of something. So basically, you are making an impossible demand because you want to train the will. However, as soon as you train the will ceases to be will. So the gesture is paradoxical in itself.
I was just thinking about this now. So should one decide to, like, for example, adopt, if we're speaking only about companion animals now, should one decide to adopt a companion animal only if one is like sure that so the person who adopts would have enough time, enough resources, so that one could offer like a life that is leading to like complete autonomy for the companion animal. I mean, I was wondering this because it seems, I mean, this would be perfect, definitely, but it seems not so feasible.
Sure. I'm thinking sure, that, yeah. Because I imagine that this would be a rather totalitarian state to be in. It's a state in which everything needs to be fixed. And then it's again a very static projection of how things should be. I imagine for myself and from what I have learned from Francesco and his wife is that it's a journey together. It's about creating a shared space together in which everybody can be as much himself as possible. This is maybe also the critique of Donaldson and Pimlichka's Zoopolis, that it suggests that there might be an ultimate state in which we're all free. And I don't think that's possible. But we could learn to create more freedom within the structures.
Could I just ask both of you for which kind of what are the references, maybe the main references, because I don't know the literature.
Yes, sorry,
so, yeah.
Sorry. I'll write it down.
Thank you, and maybe Tomáš, you said Freire. Can you give me the reference in the chat?
Sure. Yeah, it's.
I'm writing, Tomáš. I can do that.
Yeah, it's
Zoopolis. I see. Yeah.
And Freire is translated into Slovenian. Pedagogika za tirani. Založba Krtina, and you'll be able to find this in basically every library.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also in Antroza library in Karnamak.
Thank you.
Also, another author that's really interesting that Anna mentioned, but we often it's very interesting that in Slovenia we don't have those people translated. Freire is only translated because I was really pressing hard for 3 years, and before me, Anna Krajnc, the renowned Slovenian andragogist. She knew Freire personally and worked with him in the 70s in Kenya. And then she was pressing to translate the book. And in Yugoslavia, under socialism, they didn't want to translate it because their argument was, well, in socialism, there are no oppressed people.
Oh, okay. It's already done.
It's already done. We don't need this book. So that was the argument then. And then, of course, in the 90s and, in the free Slovenia, there was obviously also no need to translate this, which is basically a communist author, you know, because now we were past communism. So unbelievable that we were not able to get this book until 3 years ago. And we still don't have Ivan Illich, Deschooling Society. And I'm pressing for this, and I'm hearing, no, we won't translate this. It's something that it's not interesting for us. I think they're afraid, you know, because this idea of deschooling society, kind of, I think that people, what they hear here is, well, basically, then our jobs are superfluous if we are the educators, and it's not in our interest to translate, or what. It's hard for me to understand, because Ivan Illich is also a great author. And his idea of deschooling society doesn't mean that there is no education. It just means that education is transformed. He is a great author, actually. Yeah, Ivan Illich, that's a deschooling society.
Okay, so maybe we'll finish now.
Although I feel we could discuss this forever, because
yes, but it's getting
this new thoughts. Yeah, I agree, but we should meet more often with you. Yeah.
So thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice evening. And hopefully, you know, I can come again. So
yes,
thanks.
I hope you will, Katja. Yes.
So thanks, Branka, for inviting me, and thanks for the lovely lecture and discussion. Okay, bye-bye.
Yes, thank you for coming, Katja. Yes,
Night.
see you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're
Thank
a wonderful
you very much.
group.
Thank you.
Yes.
Send us some references if you think of something additional. I would love to read more about this.
Yes,
you know
Marcus.
maybe the best idea is to send you my article.
Oh yeah, that would be perfect.
Which this presentation is based on, and you will find all the.
That would be perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was wonderful. Great exchange.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, and thank you, Rana, for really wonderful ideas that we can reflect on. So
thank you.
Yes, of course, we hope you'll be our guest soon, and we're looking for further cooperation, and maybe this time in person. Yes, we'll see.
Hopefully, yes, that would be wonderful. Well,
okay,
take care,
so thank you,
and we'll meet again soon.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.